"He's not here to perform," Simon Cowell muttered as the Royal Guard marched across the stage in full ceremonial uniform. "This is some kind of prank." But when the stoic soldier raised a violin and played the first note, what happened next didn't just silence the judges. It left the entire studio in tears. So who was this mysterious guardsman? And who were the fallen comrades he came to honour? Before we reveal that, hit that subscribe button and comment below, telling us where in the world you're watching from. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. The studio lights blazed to life as Britain's Got Talent theme music filled the auditorium. In the centre sat the judges' panel, where Simon Cowell adjusted his signature black V-neck shirt, expression a mix of boredom and curiosity. Beside him, Amanda Holden whispered something that made Alicia Dixon laugh, while David Walliams scanned the audience with an entertainer's eye. "Simon seems particularly hard to impress today," a woman whispered to her companion. "Did you see how he cut off that dance group?" The afternoon's auditions had seen more disappointments than successes. A juggler had dropped his flaming torches, an opera singer had forgotten lyrics, and a comedian had faced Simon's withering "that's the problem with amateurs" assessment. "We need something special," Amanda said during a break, her microphone unintentionally live. "Someone who can actually make Simon smile." The audience, 5 hours into filming, showed signs of fatigue as they waited for the next Susan Boyle or Paul Potts to appear. Ant and Dec bounded onto the stage with their characteristic energy. "Ready to meet our next contestant? He's travelled from London today," Dec announced, "and says he's got something unique to share with us. Let's welcome Edward Mallory." The judges prepared for yet another aspiring performer. No one was prepared for what happened next. The first sign came when a production assistant stood suddenly straighter, eyes widening in surprise. Then came the unmistakable sound, measured, rhythmic boot strikes, each step identical in weight and timing. A collective gasp swept through the audience as a figure appeared that seemed transported from Buckingham Palace. The scarlet tunic with immaculate white belts gleamed under the studio lights. The famous bearskin cap added nearly 2 feet to the height of the man who marched with unwavering precision towards centre stage. A royal guard in full ceremonial uniform was auditioning for Britain's Got Talent. Children pointed in wonder, and several audience members instinctively rose before sitting back down. Edward Mallory's march was textbook perfection. Each step measured exactly 30 inches, arms swinging precisely, eyes fixed forward with unwavering focus. At the judges' table, reactions ranged from astonishment to skepticism. Amanda's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. Alicia leaned forward with delighted confusion. David looked utterly thrilled. Simon's reaction was most measured, a single eyebrow raised in what might have been either interest or disapproval. The guard halted exactly at centre stage, executed a perfect quarter turn to face the judges, and assumed the at-ease position, feet shoulder-width apart, hands clasped behind his back. For several seconds, no one spoke. The silence stretched until a child's voice piped up from the back. "Mummy, why is the Queen's soldier going to sing?" Laughter rippled through the audience as Simon finally spoke. "Well, this is different." "Do you speak?" Amanda asked, leaning forward, "or are you going to stay silent like at the palace?" Edward moved with precision from at ease to attention. "Lance Corporal Edward Mallory of Her Majesty's Guard, 2nd Battalion, Grenadier Guards. Permission to perform for the judges, sir." Simon's lips twitched in amusement. "Permission granted. But are you actually allowed to be here? Won't you get in trouble?" "I have received proper authorization, sir. My commanding officer approved my appearance, provided it brings no dishonour to the uniform or the regiment." "And what exactly are you planning to do?" Simon pressed, gesturing to the case Edward held. "I can't imagine you're here to show us how to stand still." A flicker of amusement crossed Edward's face. No, sir, though remaining motionless in all weather conditions for hours is indeed a skill that requires significant training. Edward placed his case on the floor. I am here to perform music, sir. Music? Amanda echoed. What instrument do you play? Violin, ma'am. David leaned forward. And how does one find time to practice while guarding Buckingham Palace? Sneaky practice sessions in the sentry box? Edward's smile lasted just long enough to be caught by cameras. The duty roster allows for military training, personal development and rest. We are not always in the bearskin caps you see at the palace. So you're a proper soldier as well as a ceremonial guard? Simon asked. Yes, sir. All guards are operational soldiers first, ceremonial guards second. Many of us have seen active combat between rotations of ceremonial duty. Something in Edward's tone caught Amanda's attention. Have you served overseas? A momentary shadow crossed his face. 3 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, most recently in Helmand Province. The auditorium grew quieter as the initial novelty gave way to deeper appreciation for the man behind the uniform. Well, Simon said, his tone noticeably less sardonic. Let's see what you've got. Edward nodded once. I joined the military academy at 17. Music and military service were the 2 constants in my life. He opened the case to reveal a violin showing subtle signs of regular use and careful maintenance. My father was a grenadier guard before me, and his father before him. 3 generations standing at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and the Tower of London. So it's a family tradition? Alicia asked. Yes, ma'am. Though the violin came from my mother's side, she was a music teacher. A genuine smile softened his features. She used to joke that I got discipline from my father and soul from her. As Edward prepared his instrument, his movements mirrored the precision of his military bearing. Most people see us only at our posts, where we stand motionless for 2-hour shifts in all weather. They don't see the 20 years of military service, the combat deployments, the training exercises. That must be frustrating, Amanda observed, being known only for standing still when you've done so much more. Edward considered this as he rosined his bow. It's not frustration, ma'am. It's pride. The ceremonial duty is the visible symbol of something much deeper, dedication to service that continues whether seen or not. Like the violin, he added, raising the instrument slightly. The performance is just the visible part of thousands of hours of practice that no one witnesses. How do you find time to maintain your musical abilities with such demanding military duties? Simon asked. In unusual places, sir. I practiced in forward operating bases between patrols in Helmand Province, in barracks during training rotations, even on transport aircraft during deployments. Edward's eyes took on a distant quality. Music becomes more important, not less, when surrounded by the realities of military service. He lifted the violin to his shoulder. In Afghanistan, I would play for my unit after difficult patrols. We lost men there, good men. The auditorium fell silent. Today, I would like to play a piece in honor of those who didn't come home. Men I served with who made the ultimate sacrifice. He looked directly at the judges. This performance is dedicated to Lance Corporal Michael Thornton, Captain James Williamson, and Private Thomas Collins, my brothers in arms who fell in Helmand Province during our last tour. With deliberate movements, Edward removed his bearskin cap, placing it carefully beside his case. Without it, his features became more visible. A man in his early 30s with close-cropped hair, strong jawline, and eyes that carried an intensity at odds with his composed expression. A thin scar traced along his right temple, a silent testament to experiences far removed from ceremonial duties. The juxtaposition was striking, the scarlet tunic of centuries-old tradition, now topped by the distinctly human face of a modern soldier. I will be playing Adagio for Strings by Samuel Barber, he said quietly. We played a recording of this at a memorial service in Helmand Province after we lost 3 men in a single operation. It has become significant to those of us who returned." Several veterans in the audience nodded in silent understanding. Edward closed his eyes briefly, a moment of centering that seemed both professional and deeply personal. When he opened them again, his gaze was fixed on a point somewhere beyond the auditorium, as though looking into memories only he could see. The auditorium fell so silent that the soft sound of bow touching strings was clearly audible in the moment before the first note. The first note emerged with a purity that seemed to catch everyone by surprise. It hung in the air, clear, resonant, and carrying an emotional weight that belied its simplicity. Then came the second note, and the third, each flowing into the next with a control that spoke of mastery beyond mere technical proficiency. Edward played with closed eyes, his rigid military posture softening as the music flowed through him. The adagio built gradually, each phrase unfolding with deliberate emotional restraint that made its impact all the more powerful. In the third row, an elderly man touched the military service pin on his lapel, his weathered face a mask of recognition. He knew this performance was about expressing what soldiers often cannot say in words. The melody climbed higher, intensity building as Edward leaned slightly into the instrument. The scarlet of his uniform seemed to deepen under the lights, the gold buttons catching occasional flashes as his bow moved with increasing passion. Amanda was the first judge to show visible emotion, her hand rising to her mouth as the music swelled. Alicia's usual energy had stilled into reverent attention. Even David sat in unusual stillness. Simon's transformation was most remarkable. The judge, famous for his skeptical expressions, watched with unguarded attention. When the piece reached its emotional crescendo, a camera caught his eyes glistening, something viewers would later rewind in disbelief. As Edward played, his mind filled with vivid memories. The first section brought back Captain Williamson, Will, to his men, a natural leader who gathered his platoon for impromptu poetry readings before dangerous patrols, claiming that beautiful words make brave men. His voice had been silenced by a sniper's bullet during a reconstruction mission. The middle section summoned images of Private Collins, barely 20, who organised football matches between concrete barriers and maintained a commentary of jokes during tedious aspects of deployment. He died pulling an Afghan child from the path of a truck rigged with explosives. And in the adagio's most intense crescendo, Edward saw Lance Corporal Thornton, his closest friend, through 2 deployments. They had shared night watch through countless desert evenings and spoken of plans for after-service. Thornton's dream of opening a carpentry shop, Edward's hope of combining music with military expertise. Those plans ended during a night patrol when Thornton was 3 steps ahead of Edward as an IED detonated. Each stroke of Edward's bow was a conversation with ghosts, maintaining connections severed by war but preserved through music. The violin had been his voice when military decorum demanded silence, his outlet when grief threatened to overwhelm. As the final notes faded, Edward completed not just a performance but a ritual of remembrance, honouring promises that sacrifices would not be forgotten, that someone would speak their names long after headlines had faded. The silence following the final note stretched for several heartbeats before being broken by a single sob. Then, as if released from a spell, the entire auditorium erupted into applause that built from appreciative to thunderous. People rose to their feet in waves. Edward remained motionless at attention, acknowledging the ovation only with a slight inclination of his head. His military bearing had returned fully, the vulnerable musician once again contained within the disciplined exterior of the Royal Guard. Amanda made no attempt to hide the tears streaming down her face. Alicia stood applauding, her composure transformed by emotion. David had risen as well, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. Simon remained seated, but was applauding with genuine appreciation, his typically guarded expression replaced by undisguised respect. The cameras caught unmistakable moisture in his eyes. As the applause began to subside, Edward carefully returned his violin to its case before reaching into an interior pocket of his tunic. He withdrew something small that caught the light as it dangled from his hand. The camera zoomed in to reveal dog tags. "These belong to Lance Corporal Michael Thornton," Edward explained, his voice steady but threaded with carefully controlled emotion. "In military tradition, when we lose a comrade, their identification tags are split. One half remains with them, the other returns home as a memorial. It is our custom to carry something of those we've lost, to ensure that as long as their names are spoken and remembered, something of them remains alive." He gently tucked the tags back into his tunic. The piece I played is performed at military memorials because it speaks to something universal about loss and honour. But for those of us who served together, it carries specific memories of specific people. When I stand guard at Buckingham Palace, I carry these tags with me during every 2-hour shift. When summer heat makes the bearskin cap nearly unbearable or winter winds cut through our tunics, I think of what my brothers endured in far worse conditions. Their memory is part of the discipline that allows us to stand motionless despite discomfort or distraction. This connection between ceremonial discipline and honouring the fallen created a new understanding of the famous stoicism of the Queen's Guard. What tourists often viewed as an amusing challenge was revealed as something far more meaningful, a daily demonstration of the self-mastery that defines military service. "I began playing violin at age 6, Edward continued, but it was in Afghanistan that music became something vital to me. Our unit was stationed at a forward operating base in Helmand Province. The routine was grueling, constant vigilance punctuated by moments of extreme danger. 3 months into my second tour, we lost Captain Williamson during what should have been a routine patrol. He was a brilliant officer, respected by everyone. The night after his memorial service, I couldn't sleep. I retrieved my violin and found a quiet corner of the base to play. I hadn't intended for anyone to hear, but soldiers are always alert to unusual sounds." A genuine smile crossed his face at the memory. "By the time I finished the first piece, 6 men had silently gathered nearby. No one spoke. When I finally stopped, Staff Sergeant Richards simply said, 'Same time tomorrow, Mallory.' It became a nightly tradition." "So you became the entertainment?" Simon asked. "Not entertainment, sir," Edward corrected gently. "Something closer to communion. In a combat zone, emotional expression becomes complicated. Military culture values stoicism. My violin became a surrogate voice, expressing what many felt but couldn't articulate." He gestured to his bearskin cap. "The discipline you see in ceremonial guards is built on the same foundations that sustain soldiers in combat: mastery of physical discomfort, control of automatic responses, attention to details that might prove critical. When tourists see us standing motionless for hours, they're witnessing not just a tradition, but the visible manifestation of values that define military service. Putting duty before comfort, maintaining standards regardless of circumstances, presenting an unwavering face to the world, even when carrying private burdens. Music and military service might seem incompatible, he concluded, but both require the same fundamental qualities: discipline, precision, technical mastery, and the ability to sublimate personal comfort to serve something larger than yourself. Amanda was the first to speak, her voice affected by emotion. "Edward, I've seen thousands of acts, but what you've shared goes beyond performance. You've given us a glimpse into something most of us will never experience directly. We see the ceremonial guards as a London attraction, something to photograph, sometimes even to mock. I'm ashamed to admit I've watched those try to make the guard laugh videos without considering the person inside the uniform." Edward acknowledged her words with a respectful nod. Your playing was extraordinary, she continued, not just technically accomplished, but filled with emotion that comes from real experience. Thank you for sharing both your music and your story with us. Alicia spoke next. The control and precision in both your playing and your bearing is remarkable. How do these two disciplines influence each other? They reinforce each other, ma'am. The focus required to maintain ceremonial stillness for hours translates to the concentration needed for complex musical passages. The attention to detail in uniform preparation parallels the methodical practice of difficult techniques, and both require you to subordinate physical discomfort to achieve something that transcends the individual. David spoke with uncharacteristic seriousness. My grandfather served in the Second World War and rarely spoke about his experiences. There was one piece of music, Elgar's Nimrod, that would always move him to tears, though he never explained why. I think I understand better now. I must confess, when you first marched out in full ceremonial dress, I expected something gimmicky. What you've shown us instead is how these seemingly different worlds, military service and classical music, can complement and enhance each other. Finally, all eyes turned to Simon. The head judge took a moment before speaking, his expression thoughtful. When he did speak, his characteristic bluntness was channeled into unexpected sincerity. Edward, I've built my career on recognizing when someone is genuine or fake. What we've witnessed today isn't just talent, though your playing is certainly at a professional level, but something I can only describe as truth. In a competition often filled with people desperate for fame at any cost, you've reminded us what real purpose looks like. Your playing honoured your fallen comrades more eloquently than any words could have done. Simon glanced down at his notes, then back up with unusual humility. I came very close to making a sarcastic comment when you first walked out. I am profoundly glad I didn't. Thank you for your service, both the visible ceremonial duties and the combat deployments most of us never see. The standing ovation had never fully subsided throughout the judges' comments, but now it swelled again. Veterans in the audience stood particularly straight, many offering subtle military nods of respect. Well, Simon said, after allowing the applause to continue, I think it's time for us to vote, though I suspect this might be one of the easier decisions we've had to make today. It's an absolute yes from me, Amanda said without hesitation. And more than that, it's a thank you for helping us see beyond the uniform to the people who wear it. Alicia nodded emphatically. Your technical skill alone would have earned my yes, but the heart behind your playing makes this an absolute privilege to witness. I'm not often speechless on this panel, David admitted, but today I find myself struggling to find words adequate to what we've experienced. It's a yes from me. All eyes turned to Simon for the final verdict. The head judge allowed a moment of theatrical tension before breaking into a rare, genuine smile. Edward, I've spent decades in the music industry, and I've learned to recognize not just technical skill, but that rarer quality that truly moves an audience. What you've shared today transcends the usual categories of this competition. It's not just a yes from me, it's a recognition that you've elevated our show by honouring it with your participation. Edward received the judge's decision with the same disciplined composure that had characterised his entire appearance. Thank you for this honour. With your permission, I would like to dedicate this moment to the men of my unit who cannot be here today. Captain James Williamson, Private Thomas Collins, and Lance Corporal Michael Thornton. In a movement as precise and deliberate as his entrance had been, Edward bent to collect his violin case and bearskin cap. With the cap properly positioned, he stood at attention, looked directly at the judge's table, and executed a formal military salute before marching toward the exit with the same measured steps. As he disappeared from view, the audience remained standing, their applause continuing long after he had gone. A tribute not just to his performance, but to everything it represented. Duty, excellence, remembrance, and the understanding that behind every uniform stands a person with depths most will never fully comprehend. Backstage, Ant and Dec waited to greet him with unusual solemnity. "That was extraordinary," Dec said simply. "Only that I hope my comrades would be proud," Edward replied quietly. "In the military, we have a saying, 'Stand for those who stood for us.' Today, I stood for them." What would you do if you discovered an unexpected talent in someone society has stereotyped? Has a performance ever moved you to tears because of the story behind it? These are the questions that Edward Mallory's extraordinary audition leaves us with today. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. With new stories about Royal Guards every day, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Press that bell icon to be notified immediately when our next video drops. Share this video with anyone who's ever watched the Royal Guards at Buckingham Palace or questioned the depths behind ceremonial traditions. Our previous videos about Royal Guards are appearing on your screen right now. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time with another brand new Royal Guard story you won't want to miss.